Now, some of these illustration rares are doing crazy things, and would you have believed someone if they said that the Scarlet and Violet era would be even more popular than the Sword and Shield era? I honestly don't know how many people would have believed that, and it's easy to say, oh, well, if Sword and Shield era was so popular, it was just obvious that Scarlet and Violet would be popular as well, but I don't think that people anticipated that we would be in an even more in-demand era than we were back then. Like, you need to remember, right? What we were dealing with during the Sword and Shield era, we had like a 1 in a 100-year event, and it created so much pressure and demand, and understandably, Pokemon couldn't keep up with the newfound demand. It was something that I think every collector just understood, right? However, right now, it's a completely different beast. Now, also, if it is your first time on the channel and you do enjoy Pokemon card collecting, Pokemon investing, and price discussion, feel free to subscribe. I'd honestly love to have you on board the channel. Now, as I was saying with the Sword and Shield era, I think that was a lesson that printing and production demands are very important, and printing to demand is crucial. And Pokemon really did improve this, and stock issues weren't ever really a thing ever since 2021. So why are we dealing with this right now? Well, before I get into that, it's probably important to talk about some of the prices of some of the special illustration rares and illustration rares that's happening at the moment. I think right now is a really interesting time for both English and Japanese sets as well, because Japanese sets were always your cheaper alternatives, right? Though it seems Japanese products are also becoming harder and harder to find. Though before I get into that, I just wanted to cover today's video sponsor, which is Buy. Now, Buy is a fantastic website to buy Japanese products, and you can buy directly from Japanese stores. When using Buy, you can literally buy anything from Japan. It allows you to buy from Rakuma, Amazon Japan, Yahoo Japan Shopping, Yahoo Japan Auction, along with many more, and it's all done through the one place, which is Buy. So on Buy, you'll be able to search for any Japanese products which are available, and you can just search for what you want, and you can see what you can buy. Buy then covers the entire purchasing process on your behalf. Buy purchases the items from Japanese stores, and then it gets shipped to their warehouse, and then the products are shipped directly to you. So if you want to avoid paying huge prices for items, Buy then becomes incredibly useful, and it's also very internationally friendly, as Buy ships to multiple regions, which include North America, Oceania, and Europe. So if you're interested and it's your first time, all my viewers get access to a 10% discount for their first orders. Sign up by using the link in the description, and hopefully you can pick up some of your favorite Japanese products. So some really interesting price movements have obviously been happening with what's been happening with Pokemon at the moment. Now, we all know that Pokemon cards are very popular right now. Everyone's speaking about it. Everyone's quite interested in Pokemon cards again. There's obviously been a lot of events that have unfolded which have made Pokemon cards, climb to this height once again, particularly mainly around Pokemon TCG Pocket. That was probably one of the starting points when that got released in November of 2024. It really caused this huge new surge of popularity to come in, and then of course you did have Surging Sparks as well, which was such a popular Pokemon set. And now kind of everything's been like a little bit of a snowball effect, right? Everything's just kind of compounded from one win to another win. It's kind of like success breeds success, right? So you did have the Surging Sparks be popular. Now you got Prismatic Evolution sold out. Now Journey Together is sold out in pre-orders. However, right now I'm looking at the Charizard Special Illustration Rare, and I have to say some interesting price movements have been happening. You can see right now in the last 3 months, this was sitting at 104 US. And of course, it had a bit of a steady climb, and right now it's sitting at $177. If we pull this into the year graph, some really interesting price movements have happened, right? So you can see on pre-release, or when this kind of just released, it sold for $184. Of course, usually when cards, are just released, the first kind of week of their release, they're always very highly priced. And then usually what happens, a big decline happens, as you can see what happened in this graph here, and it hit a low of 103. Now that's kind of changing, but you can see right now, this is sitting at 179. It's nearly exceeding its kind of pre-release price point. Now, as I was just saying before, pre-release price points are usually the top of the market because, a lot of people just don't have patience and they just want the card now, though you usually do always get the worst deal when you buy a card on pre-release. However, that is going to shift, I think, this year. Unless Pokemon can kind of increase the production of these sets, it's likely you will see the opposite happen. Moving forward, you can see the Gardevoir Special Illustration Rare, really unique card, okay? This is one of the best artworks of the Scarlet and Violet era. It was released quite early early in the Scarlet and Violet era, and I still think it is one of the best artworks that they have made. But anyway, we're looking at the last 3 months. You can see this was sitting at 39 USD, and now it's kind of climbed to $89, more than doubling in price, right? And I do think that this card is still quite fairly priced given the caliber of artwork and given the competitors of the set. You've got the Bubble Mew and you've got the Charizard Special Illustration Rare. This Gardevoir is actually lagging a little bit behind those right now, so I still think the price point for this is decent, okay? Do I think it can climb? I do think it does have more room to grow, but whether or not that's going to eventuate, it just depends where the market kind of sits with this at the moment, right? Now, moving on to another interesting one is the Ceruledge Illustration Rare. Now, why this is such an interesting one for me is because it's not a textured SIR. However, you can see right now, $31 on that pre-release kind of pricing, went down to around 15 USD, and right now you can see this is selling at $38. Quite a nice price increase. You can see in that last month, it's definitely had some movement, right? I do think this artwork is absolutely incredible. I'm not surprised. I do think if this was an SIR, the price point would be very, very high. I do think having it as an illustration rare did kind of calm that demand down a little bit. But then again, we have seen illustration rares also just climb in value as well. It doesn't just mean if it's an SIR, it's going to be so expensive. I mean, look at what's happening with the Eevee. Right now I'm on the Eevee, and you can see in the last 3 months, wild price increases, man. We're looking at this. This was sitting at 48 USD. Pretty decent price. It still is an Eevee. Very, very unique and cute artwork, okay? We go all the way right now, and it's sitting at 89 USD for an illustration rare. That is quite an expensive card. We pull that into the year graph, and you can see that this has had a very nice and healthy climb up. Look, I always did speak a lot about this Eevee. I did make a few videos talking about undervalued cards. I did always think this Eevee was very undervalued when it was sitting around this 41 USD range, particularly because I do know that the evolutions have such a high fan demand, and it wasn't making much sense that this was so undervalued compared to the Magikarp, which was also an illustration rare from Paldea Evolved. I did think that this Eevee had more room to grow, and still right now it is quite an expensive illustration rare, but Twilight Masquerade will eventually become harder and harder to find, and I can see good things happening for this Eevee. Now moving on as well, we do have the Gastly illustration rare. In the last 3 months, this has also climbed, selling at 21 USD, and of course now sitting at 37 USD. Now if you are watching this before the 17th of January, I actually am going live and giving away 50 packs of Temporal Forces. Maybe you can win this card. To enter the giveaway, you can join through my Discord. I will be going live on YouTube. It probably will be a really fun event, so definitely feel free to join my Discord server so you can get more details on that. Nonetheless, this Gastly is quite interesting. We pull this into the year graph. You can see this has had some kind of up and down moments, right? When it released, it was selling for 30 USD. Went down to $16, then it climbed back again to 33, then it had a nice kind of slowdown to 20 USD, and right now it's sitting at 35 USD, kind of exceeding its previous highs. Very likely if Temporal Forces gets harder and harder to find, that this may also slowly but steadily climb in value, right? Moving on to the next one, which is the Magikarp illustration rare. Now, this one has kind of broke the barrier of what's possible for illustration rares, because traditionally it was always your special illustration rares getting these prices, right? It shouldn't be that an illustration rare can even compete with rarer cards within the set, but this Magikarp is definitely taking that to a new level. Check this out. I'm going to pull this one into the year graph so you can see the price movement of it, right? It was sitting at last year for around 68 USD, which was still very, very expensive pricing for illustration rare standards. And you can see this climbed all the way up to 150 USD, dropped down to around 110 in September, and now look at this, exceeded everything that was possible, sitting at 222 USD. Quite an expensive card. Pull that into the month graph, and you can see with what's happening with Pokemon at the moment, this card is really climbing up in value. I do think this card is one of the most iconic cards of the Scarlet and Violet era, and even though it got released with Paldea Evolved, which was the second set of the Scarlet and Violet era, I do think it's going to be hard for a lot of cards to kind of have this iconic status like the Magikarp. It made a lot of headlines when it released, and of course it is a fantastic artwork. Shinji Kanda, very reminiscent of Giratina V from Lost Origin. Really, really unique art style. But now, of course, Magikarp is is from Paldea Evolved, but Paldea Evolved as a booster box is also climbing up in value, sitting at 130 USD booster box, and right now it's sitting at $195. You pull that in the 1 month graph and you can see Paldea Evolved just recently, since Christmas, has just gone up and shot up in value. Obviously, it's a really cool set. That Magikarp is the king of this set. It's kind of the reason why it's so desired. But as long as that Magikarp keeps rising, I can't see Paldea Evolved not also climbing in value, because there is a chance that you can pull some of those really unique artworks within the set. You do have the Chen Pao, you do have the Raichu illustration rare, you've got the Magikarp. There's actually a lot of unique cards within Paldea Evolved, right? Now, one of the more interesting ones I think is the Pokemon Center promo, the Charmander, which came in the Obsidian Flames Elite Trainer box. Very, very unique. I'm going to pull this into the year graph. You can see this one has also done some wild things. Last year, you could have bought this for $20, which is kind of wild to think about right now, because Pokemon Center stamped promos have all climbed tremendously in value, but sitting at $20 last year. We pull this up right now, what's happening, and it's selling for 123 USD per raw copy. Now, if you think that's interesting, if you can get a PSA 10 copy of this card, look at the prices of what PSA 10 copies are selling for on eBay. These are recently sold prices. And this is where Pokemon collecting and investing cannot make sense. Now, as you can see here, the recently sold prices of the PSA 10 are 949 USD, 949 USD again. Some really, really wild prices are happening here. The reason why they're so expensive, because yes, you can get the card guaranteed within the Pokemon Center Elite Trainer box, but the reason why the PSA 10s get this kind of price point, and I speak about it a lot, when promo cards come in those boxes, it's very, very easy for them to get damaged. So scoring high grades becomes incredibly difficult. To get a PSA 10 is very hard, because it's very likely when those boxes are moving out in transit, when they're traveling, how people store them on shelves, how stores place them on shelves, all this matters, because it slowly damages the corners of the cards. Even pulling it out of the protective packaging it comes in can damage the card. So it's much more likely that these promos get an 8 or a 9 rather than the 10. Though nonetheless, you can see the price point of this card is actually reaching new highs. Now, one of the more interesting ones here is the Pokemon 151 UPC promo card, right? Which is the Mew. Look at this, man. I'm going to pull this into the year graph. Now, this one is just, it's kind of like a meme coin, right? How much this has grown in value. You can see last year, this was selling for $3.50. It was pretty much a guaranteed card, right? Now, Pokemon 151 UPCs last year were just so abundantly available. Anyone could have bought one. There was nothing that special about it, right? And this was selling for $3.50. You pull that right now and check this out, man. Selling for $28. What an absurd increase, man. You could see that the price growth was actually out of this world. And I think it's going to be very hard for this to go down in value, because it is very unlikely that any more 151 UPCs are going to come onto the market. Pretty much now done and dusted, never say never, but how it's going right now, if there was going to be any more 151 products, it would be more like what we see with Blooming Waters at the moment, where it would be released as special promos, or they come in kind of special sets. It's very unlikely that a 151 UPC would be re-entering the market. Though, it would be very interesting if that did happen. Now, one of the more interesting ones is the Obsidian Flames Ninetales. Now, what's interesting about this card, last year when I started this channel, this was such a long time ago, I did make a video talking about the 8 best Pokemon cards under $8. And this Ninetales last year was sitting under $8. Pull this into the year graph, and you can see right now it's selling for 22 USD. If we go to what it was selling for last year, you can see $6. So I remember when I looked at this card, it didn't really make much sense because of how gorgeous the artwork is. I do think if this was released as a special illustration rare, we would be looking at one of the most popular and in-demand cards of the Scarlet and Violet era. I do think the fact that Obsidian Flames had such generous pull rates, along with the fact that it was an illustration rare, did help calm the price point down. But nonetheless, you can see in the last 3 months that the price has gone steadily upwards, selling for $11 in October, and right now 21 USD. I do think that this card is still quite undervalued for how good the artwork is. Now, with saying that, as much as these prices have been increasing, it does leave a lot of questions about the future of this hobby. We'll actually cover some of the most unique Pokemon investing knowledge in this video right here. Within this video, I reveal some of the best information relating to the hobby and how things work. Click the video that's appearing on screen and I'll see you there.